So in conclusion, I just want to share just some background and how revisionism has crept into the fabric of the United States of America. And it has to do with our Star-Spangled Banner, our national anthem. So who wrote the national anthem? Who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner? Many of you say, yeah, Francis Scott Key. He didn't actually write the Star-Spangled Banner. He wrote The Defense of Fort McHenry. It's a poem. Now that later became, so yes, you're right, that became the national anthem. And he wrote these 4 stanzas, these beautiful stanzas to this poem, which became our anthem. Well, I'm going to give some context. What was going on that stirred up Francis Scott Key to write this poem, this incredible poem that we now have memorized only a little piece of it. Sadly, we've lost a big chunk of it. So the War of 1812 is going along, and in 1814, the British defeat Napoleon in Europe. So many of their forces that were tied up trying to battle with the French and with Napoleon are now redirected to the United States to basically, how did the British view the United States of America? They were embarrassed, right? This fledgling little punk nation, right, that basically embarrassed them dramatically just a few short decades earlier. The British wanted to take us out because we were still not a very mature military power. So 1814, they redirect literally thousands of troops from the European continent over to America. They redirect the majority of their armada, the naval armada, over to the United States. And so they started a massive offensive, and they attacked Washington, D.C., our capital. Our capital fell. They took over Washington, D.C., and what did they do to it? They burnt it to the ground. They started this massive march of destruction north. And once again, the founders were saying, oh God, they were crying out to God. They were praying, saying, and fasting and praying, saying, Lord, save us, because we're about to be wiped out again. And exactly what Daniel Webster was saying, the miraculous nature of what brought us into being in 1776 and those years following, we were about to get wiped out. Again, they burnt the capital to the ground, and so they start the march northward to Baltimore. Well, on the way north, they capture a young doctor by the name of William Beans. He happened to be the friend of a young lawyer, 35-year-old lawyer named Francis Scott Key. Hence, this brings Key into it. So Key says, hey, why did you capture this guy? He's actually been a very godly and Christian man, and he has not mistreated British soldiers and other British people like you're saying he did. They accused Bean of mistreating British, and so they captured him. He's out on a ship. He's out outside of Fort McHenry, outside of Baltimore on the bay. And so Francis Scott Key takes a friend, they put up a white flag, and they go out to negotiate Bean's release. So he actually meets with one of the higher officers in the British Army, and they agree to release him because Key brought these letters from British people, British soldiers and others, saying that, oh, Dr. Beans is a great person. He didn't mistreat me. He treated me very nicely. So they agree to let him go. But while he's out on the ships, he overhears the plans of the British and how they're going to attack Baltimore, and first, the main defense of Baltimore was Fort McHenry. So, they see Fort McHenry there, they see the flag, the Star-Spangled Banner flying high, and Francis Scott Key overhears they're going to do this massive naval bombardment where they want to take Fort McHenry out. So they have this huge armada, all of the cannons and the mortars on the British ships and the rocket ships, all positioned themselves just outside of the range of the cannons on Fort McHenry. So they're way out here. And they start on September 13th. They start a barrage of Fort McHenry with the intent to basically level it and to the ground, destroy the fort. And for 24 hours straight, There were these mortars on the ships that were these high trajectory attack that was going in because they had to be outside of the range of the guns at Fort McHenry. So they had these bombs of the mortars and cannons bursting in air and landing at Fort McHenry, and there's these rockets, and they had this reddish glare that were streaming over these high trajectory arc over to the thing. So the morning of the 13th, this starts. It goes for 24 hours, right? So Francis Scott Key is watching this happen, and he sees, through the night, he sees, these flashes of the bombs bursting and the rocket's red glare, and he sees evidence that the Star-Spangled Banner was still flying. And it gets to the morning of September 14th, and it stops. The barrage stops. And Francis Scott Key is earnestly looking, and just as the dawn's early light is coming up, he can't see the flag. All he sees is the smoke and the mist, and he's yearning over the edge of the ship to see if he can see the flag, and all of a sudden he just gets stirred up, and he starts to write this poem. He pulls out this envelope, pulls out a pen, and he starts jotting down in the back of this envelope. It says, "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last." He goes on, it's a question mark. He can't see the flag. Okay, raise your hand if you've ever heard, right, the Star-Spangled Banner sung. Most of all of you have heard of it, and almost all of you can recite it, and I say that's great. But guess how many stanzas there are of this poem and now our national anthem? Is there one? No, you only know one. There's 4 stanzas. And for hundreds of years, we used to sing them all, including the 4th one. Well, as you know, it goes on to say, the bombs bursting in air, the rocket's red glare. Oh, say, does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Question mark. His first stanza ends in a question mark. Look, I'm glad you're patriotic and like the national anthem in that first stanza. That's great. But it ends in a question mark where he doesn't even know if the Star-Spangled Banner was there. And so my point is I want everyone to learn the 4th stanza, and arguably the most important one, where he goes on in his poem to describe how indeed the Star-Spangled Banner does still wave. Instead of ending in a question mark at our ball games, at our events where we sing the national anthem, and in fact, historically, we used to almost always sing the 1st and 4th stanzas until very recently. The 4th stanza has been lost. And now I'm going to try to sing this. Give me a little grace here. But I'm going to sing the 4th stanza, and you tell me how many references to God are there in this stanza. Oh, thus be it ever, when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our motto: in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Now, why don't we sing that more in the ball games, in all the ceremonies and events? It references God 4 times, right? And it says our motto. What's the motto of the United States? In God is our trust. I exhort you all, if you ever have any influence over the choosing of the words of the national anthem, to just sing the 4th stanza. It's the national anthem. Why don't we sing it anymore? We don't sing it because of the revisionism and the secularization that has happened to our nation. And I just want to fire you up to be able to know our heritage, including our national anthem, that so richly declares boldly, not with a question mark, does the banner still wave? He says it triumphantly waves. And you know what? That was the turning point of the battle for Fort McHenry and the defense of Fort McHenry, that poem that Francis Scott Key wrote. That was the turning point of the War of 1812. We went on to defeat the British. And we went on, and God continued to bless this nation abundantly because we were a nation that trusted in God. In God we trust for our hope, for our prosperity, for everything.